Welcome to Circular Firing Squad. I'm Marty Gensius, a counseling faculty at Kent State University and host for Circular Firing Squad. We've got 6 members, 6 questions, and 6 answers for each question. Questions are generated by each squad member and run from the deep to the dopey. Let's go ahead with roll call. Elliot, you're up first.
Hi, everybody. I'm Elliot Ingersoll, professor of counseling at Cleveland State University and co-host of Apply Topically.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Martyr. I am a doctoral candidate at Kent State University, a practicing clinical counselor, and co-host of Grad School Deconstructed.
Hi, everyone. I am Eric Perry. I'm a clinical faculty member at Southern New Hampshire University and co-host of the Tech Savvy Professor.
Hey, everyone. I'm Gina Martin. I am a doctoral candidate at the University of Iowa and adjunct faculty at Northwestern University.
Hey, everyone. Jen Cook, assistant professor, counselor education and counseling psychology at Marquette University.
Elliot, you've got the first question for tonight. You're going to love this. I don't read books. In the traditional sense, I have a very small table. My sleep apnea machine sits on it, my clock, and a place to put my phone. Well, I don't read them the way that I think the question was intended. I consume information differently than novels or hardcover nonfiction books. Most of the information I get is related to work. It's purposeful. Sometimes, I dig around and look at some political stuff. But I'm reading textbooks or articles or websites to prep for class, and it's on devices. It's never on paper form. I can manage and hold a device. Generally, if I'm going to do some leisure reading, it's going to be in bed. It's easier for me to lay down and read the information that way. Our faculty, and I'm part of this, is reading Cast by Isabella Wilkerson for what we have as a book club now. And that's the closest I get to a book on my reading table. Steph?
So similarly, I don't really read books for pleasure. All the reading done throughout the day, and also it just hurts my head. In general, I read when I have to read, and I enjoy stories, and I read a lot when I was younger. But I think being in the doc program, I have given my eyesight to the doc program. I have donated it willingly, and so I listen to a lot of audiobooks, and we listen at night. It's like you get a bedtime story. So I have recently returned to trying out The Magicians again. And then I also have in queue Troublemaker by Leah Remini, doing the whole Scientology inside thing. I think that one was interesting to listen to, but I'm going back to listen to it right now for a client that I'm working with. And then also in queue is Mask of the Red Death by Cory Doctorow as part of the Radicalized series. Eric.
Yeah, I do some reading, but I've been on an audiobook kick. That's really where I get most of my literary type entertainment. I was just talking prior to the show about a book called Red Rising that I started in paper form and am finishing listening to now. And really, it's just interesting to me because it's been banned in a couple of countries outside of here. It's kind of a dystopian novel fiction, very sci-fi kind of tones to it, but the message in it is pretty clear. So it's interesting for me, but I get a lot of relaxation out of it, and I like. I've been through some of the urban fantasy series and those types of things. Alex Cross. Read a lot of those. And my genres change as my moods change. So I might have 3 or 4 ongoing at one time. I do a lot of the, same kind of professional development reading, but I do have a tendency to slip into my fun reading here and there when I should probably be reading a textbook or an article. Oh, is anyone from SNU listening? Anyway, Gina?
Yeah, I'm going to be picking up Red Rising soon to add that to my reading list as well, Eric. Additionally, I recently read this book and I loved it. It was kind of counseling related, kind of not, a little bit textbook-y, but not really. It's called Connected Teaching by Harriet Schwartz. I don't know if any of you have read it. it's a phenomenal book, and I really, really enjoyed that. Additionally, I read Group by, I cannot remember who that's by, but it's the popular new in the Reese's Book Club. It's about group therapy. And I thought that was really fascinating as well. Another kind of counseling related book, but not really. And finally, I read Maybe You Should Talk to Someone by Lori Gottlieb, which is also somewhat related to counseling. We're redoing a class, and we were thinking about requiring that one. So all the instructors gave it a read through and to see what we thought. And I thought that one was also really, really well done. So that's a little bit about what's been on mine. Jen?
Well, I still do read print media in addition to online. So I've converted all online for work-related things. So thinking about like articles, I don't print them. And that harkens back to my doctoral days when I came home from being away for a few days and had a huge stack of articles that I had read and marked up. And my cat, who was very irritated that I had been gone for a few days, decided to urinate on said stack of hard copy articles. And so at that point, I decided it was time to make the switch with those kinds of things, because for whatever reason, he's not interested in pissing on novels. So I still read hard copy novels. I love to like go to the book boxes in my neighborhood and see what people have swapped out. And I'm pretty religious about like I must be carrying a book to swap out, because I won't take a book unless I have one to give to the box, which is kind of funny. But I still read magazines. So I subscribe to Fast Company, which is a kind of maybe a strange read that you wouldn't expect from a counselor educator. But I think that there's a lot in there that's not just about tech and business, but things that are applicable to leadership and to who we are as professionals that I really get a lot out of. On my side table right now, which is in my living room, I do not read in bed. I have trained myself to stay awake to read, not to use reading to go to sleep. That was something I had to make a conscious decision about 20 years ago. So I do not typically read in bed unless I'm on vacation. And so I have a couple of cookbooks because I've been trying out some new recipes. And yes, I like to read print recipes. If anybody scans recipes online, you know how many ads there are for every recipe that you want to read, and they're just giving you all of these videos. I don't need to watch you make it. I know how to cream butter. Thank you very much. So I do love the old cookbooks, especially the ones that talk about items that we don't really know what they are anymore when they call for oleo and things of that nature. So I love those kinds of things. But I am reading the Lee Child series that started in the 90s right now. That is a British writer, mystery, suspense kind of stuff, but he writes about US, and it's quirky and fun and awful all at the same time. And so I've really been enjoying that series. Elliot.
Well, I'm, with the ADHD, I am a print reader. In a parallel universe, I am the Edward G. Robinson character in Soylent Green, who knows how to go into like bookstores and libraries and find information for everybody. I thought that was brilliant. They just didn't anticipate the internet. I'm just finishing The Dead Are Arising, The Life of Malcolm X, which is brilliant and so deeply researched. I've always been fascinated with him, and there's so many new things about his life that come through in that book. And the others are related more to my fiction writing. Every night I read part of the Dictionary of Smoky Mountain English, which is one of the characters in a novel I'm working on, is from remote Appalachian region. So I'm familiarizing myself with that. And then a newer one, Our Bodies, Their Battlefields, War Through the Lives of Women. Not a very pleasant read, but a very important read for anyone who has feminist leanings. Hard read, but it's important. Next question goes to you, Marty.
So irrespective of your competence, so don't use your competence as a decision in this. What course in counseling do you have no interest in teaching whatsoever? And I know that's kind of an extreme statement, but what course just does not excite you? Steph?
Okay, so first, I mean, I understand the spirit of the question, but the first thing I'm going to say is I will teach any class at any time that anybody would be so kind as to give me an opportunity to teach. So I am taking any subject. There's nothing I don't want to teach. That being said, just like I said, in the spirit of the question, it's not because I don't have an interest. In fact, it's because I have a great interest, but I'm not sure if I'm, I just think anxiety producing wise, multicultural can be really difficult. I would want to lean into it more. I think I'm not quite, it's just, I know how to do it. I can do it fine. At the same time, it just causes a little bit more anxiety going into class, I think, than some of the other courses might for myself. But again, I will teach anything, I promise. All right, Eric.
I feel like we're all going to need disclaimers. My institution is listening. I'm in trouble. I'll teach anything. There's nothing in the curriculum really that totally puts me off. I spent some time as a program coordinator and coordinating field work, and I have zero interest in practicum or internship right now. And I think that'll change over time. I burnt myself out on it. I think topically, though, I have interest in a lot of areas that maybe others don't as much. I love career. It's one of my favorites. I can teach Super's Rainbow right now with a smile on my face because it's pretty, it's happy. It's, the whole thing is just career is just fluff. It makes me feel good. And, we deal with a lot of serious things. So career is a favorite of mine. I love teaching research. I'm a numbers guy. I'm all about statistics and I can do all of those things. Those things make me really happy. But if you said, I want you to teach practicum and monitor hours, I would cry. Bring you real, actual tears. Gina?
So continuing with the disclaimer, I too will teach anything that anyone is willing to let me teach. That being said, I agree with both of you in that those are definitely challenges that you've brought up. But I think, Eric, I'm going to disagree with you. I think career would be really, really tough to teach. And the reason is I come from such a trauma background and such a in the trenches. That's what I love, that I did I apologize if anyone from my institution is listening, but I did my practicum experience in my doc program at the Career Center. And I felt like I was a robot every time I was talking to, and today, the same types of things, the same types of questions. And coming from that intensive trauma in the trenches background, it just felt like I was on a monotone repeat of exactly what I did the day before. That being said, I think that would be a tough one. I also think that ethics would be pretty tough to teach because of, and it would depend on the developmental level of the student, but I think it would also be really challenging because I know I teach a brief segment of that in my intro class. And every time it's, well, what about this obscure situation? Well, what about this obscure situation? And it's like, you need to expand from those details, look past the minutia of some of this stuff and get in the spirit of that. So I think that would be a challenge. But that being said, I will teach anything. Each class brings its own challenges. Jen?
I agree. Each class does bring its own challenges. I will teach anything. Eric, when you were talking about getting burned out on prac and internship, that's how I got with group. It was a very challenging class to teach. I felt like I really got into it. And then when we had a new faculty member who was coming to join our team, and she wanted to teach it, I said, I'll give it up because I was so burned out on it. And I love it. But the way that I teach it is incredibly intense. And it was intense and helping them with the skills and, going through all of the phases. And so I gave it up. I would say that there's a few classes I'm dying to teach because I haven't gotten a chance to yet. I won't bring those up because that's not the question. However, career is not one of them. And I think part of that is because I had such a cruddy career experience. I really hope the person who taught my career class is unlikely to be listening to this, but the person who taught it was about to retire, and he had a very interesting way of saying he didn't care throughout the course. And so, given those dynamics, I felt like I learned it well enough and I understand it. And I love that our profession is grounded so deeply in career counseling. And by the same token, I don't have a joy of it. I don't have an excitement for it. And I think that's a direct result of having had a professor in my master's program who had one foot out the door and was completely over it. So the passion for career teaching never quite got in there the way that I would have hoped it would. But as everyone has said, I'll teach anything. So anytime I go on the job market, just know Jen Cook is the person who will teach anything in the core. Elliot.
I love these answers. Yeah, like you all, I will still teach anything. Not a problem because I love teaching. But I will say I had two responses to this. And the very first course I taught was a result of this very twisted, arranged marriage between counselor education and colleges of education. It really bugs me. And so a lot of us ended up teaching educational research. And I love teaching research, but educational research, I'm like, this is like teaching an aspiring trumpet player about the violin. I said, I don't need to teach studies about kids reading to somebody who's wanting to be a counselor. And we have fought for years to get our own counseling research course. And it's been a very slow slog. But the other one was career. And it was mainly because I would meet people, and not to tell tales out of school, but they were mostly counseling psychologists. And they were like, I love career. I'm so about career. And I'd be like, oh, you must see a lot of clients. Oh, well, I don't practice. Okay, wait a minute. You love it, but you don't practice it. And then I was like, how many full-time career counselors are out there? And I think there are a lot in college counseling centers, but outside of that, it's a rough field because the people who need it the most don't have any money because they're unemployed. I mean, it's a rough go. Sorry, little soapbox there. Marty, back to you.
Well, the first job that I took, I was doing trips back and forth to my home campus where I'd finished my dissertation. And I went over to the place that I was going to get a job, or that I had gotten a job. And they said, guess what? You're going to teach these two courses, career and assessment. And I thought, well, that was a strange choice for me because those really aren't my backgrounds. And they used some twisted logic in telling me, well, you worked in business and you worked in EAP, so you can teach a career course. And you certainly have done assessments as part of your doctoral program, so you can teach an assessment course. And I realized my job at that time was to teach both of those courses the best that I could and sort of add my own little piece onto it. I went back to my home campus and I said to my chair, Joe, you will not believe what they are going to have me teach. And he said, career and assessment. And I was like, what? He said, those are the two courses nobody wants to teach. Of course, they're going to give you that to teach. So I kind of took it on my back and I enjoyed career. I think there's a lot of things that you can do in career. So I enjoyed it. Those are not my favorite. Our students are generally afraid of numbers. So the research and the assessment courses are pretty scary. But for me, it's got to be anything to do with school counseling. Now, I think there's place for what we do when we teach group work and how that fits into school settings, and when we teach communication skills and how that fits into school settings. But the core school counseling courses, to me, are just not anything they should ask me to teach, but also not anything I'm really interested in teaching. So that's where that question came from and kind of hit me with. Steph, you're up with the next question.
Where do you find inspiration? Eric.
So I took this in a couple of different directions, and I guess what I settled on is when I need it, when I'm looking for it, it needs to be not where I'm sitting. So I know that I need to remove myself from where my norm is. So I try and venture out and do things. And normally that would be traveling or a different activity or involvement with a different group or volunteering or finding something outside of what I normally do that would bring some kind of inspiration or some different experience. It's been challenging with what's been going on recently to do those types of things. And I've really tried to fit that into a virtual digital kind of bubble. And, honestly, when I look for inspiration, I often look if it's not me removing myself, it's looking to the people who generally inspire me. So I have a lot of friends and mentors and colleagues and members of my own family, my kids, my spouse, that I really look to when inspiration is needed. So if it's not the place, it's the people, or both, generally is what I end up going with. What about you, Gina?
Yeah, I think this is a hard question because for me, I think it's everywhere and nowhere all at once. So one thing, I like to go for runs. Oftentimes, it depends on where I'm at. Obviously, in the wintertime, I don't get out for a lot of leisure runs, but I really like to run. And then that's a place where I'll find a lot of inspiration. Additionally, like self-reflection, taking time to just be alone, taking time to be with my thoughts, taking time to look introspectively. That'll also sometimes produce inspiration, but it depends on the situation. I also think in the shower is another place that I do a lot of thinking, come up with a lot of good research questions in the shower, and that kind of thing. So I think it depends on what I'm looking for. It depends on what's needed in that moment. It can also come, like Eric, you were mentioning, just in the form of like conversations with loved ones and conversations with mentors and conversations with colleagues. And so I think it can be everywhere. It just depends on what you're looking for. Jen?
I'd say for me that it mostly comes in movement and in the mundane, which both Gina and Eric are speaking to some degree. The movement piece for me is typically going somewhere, of changing environment, seeing something different. But it could also be, walking, taking a walk, or going a different route. Sometimes that's in the car, of like you drive a different way to go to the grocery than what you typically do, and you happen to notice something. And I put the mundane into that noticing piece because I notice things when I allow my mind to be free from those things that are holding me down or stressing me or making me feel like that I'm unmotivated or uninspired or, those types of things. And when you mentioned the shower, Gina, like I legitimately keep dry erase markers in my bathroom so that I can reach out of the shower and jot onto the mirror. I don't know if you all know this, that you can use dry erase markers on mirrors and it comes off just with Windex like everything else. Because things come to me in the shower. It's the seemingly mundane, right? Of like, you scrubbing your hair and whatnot. And all of a sudden something pops into your mind that you want to remember, or that feels inspirational, or that feels like a unique thought that you hadn't had before. I think there have been some, at least I would say for me, some unique challenges with the movement, because I've legitimately been within, I don't know, maybe a 20-mile radius since March. I haven't gone any further than that. And I'm accustomed to seeing people, seeing places, going to my office, seeing more than just one colleague when I do go to campus. And those kinds of things, they spark conversations. I was joking with a colleague last week about how there haven't been any kitchen conversations since before March, because the kitchen is where business gets done at my institution, because you run into somebody who's getting a cup of coffee or getting their lunch out of the fridge, and our kitchen is very small. So now with COVID, only one person is allowed in the kitchen at a time. So you don't have kitchen conversations anymore that were very vital to that dynamic that brings about like, okay, I'm a human in this world who's interacting. So all of this is to say, I think it's in the mundane, the kitchen conversations, the taking a walk, taking a new route, and in the movement of it all. And that there has to be that movement, because without movement, stagnation, no inspiration. Elliot?
Yeah, those are, really important thing. I love that. Movement is important. Yeah. And so I kind of broke it down interpersonally, the students that I work with. And I love our students at Cleveland State because they're like, if they've got something to say, they're going to say it. And if they disagree with a point I've made, they'll say it in whatever way, is comfortable for them, which is often a bit in my face. And I'm like totally fine with that. I love that. Intrapersonally, and again, kind of with ADHD, there are two things that work. Music, playing it or cranking it is awesome. And that really gets me rolling into new fields of thought. And physical exhaustion. I learned before I got diagnosed that if I really worked out to the point where I was just flat out exhausted, new stuff would emerge. And in that space of exhaustion, ideas would bubble up. And then I would all right, I'd write them down and I would come back to them. And some of them turned out to be books that I wrote, papers that I wrote, or lesson plans that I thought might have a little more edge that our students would appreciate. So, and I will say, legal altered states on occasion have played a role. Sometimes I need to get my brain to unplug, and, certain substances, which are legal now, will do that. And I am not ashamed to say that I will make use of said substances on occasion. Marty, how about you?
In the shower. I mean, when I read that question, it was like in the shower. That's where everything gets unstuck for me in terms of ideas. There's something about warm water and isolation that I think just frees up my thinking about it, or something pops into my head and it's the solution to the problem that I want, whether it's writer's block and I can't think of other pieces I need to put in to finish this. I get it in the shower. And sometimes taking a long shower really frees that up for problem solving. I'd say second to that, just before I'm going to bed, which would be a hypnagogic state, and just before I wake up, which is a hypnopompic state. That is a place between dream and awake where I start processing things and I come up with more creative ideas than if I was completely awake or completely asleep, obviously. So those states seem to help me get unstuck. Showers and those two places. Steph?
Absolutely. I think the running, and people have been talking about like the unstuckedness that they get through maybe times of being quiet and separated, or just being able to be alone with their thoughts, but also not having to think about anything specific in particular. I get a lot from pop culture, I guess. I am just, if there's like an assignment or a lecture or something to do. So for instance, I'm going to also mitigate my answer from the last question. I'm going to talk about two assignments or two places I found inspiration for a multicultural class in some way, shape, or form. All right. So one was as a student where it was just had to do a digital story. It was an advanced multicultural class. And I was first thinking, I knew I wanted to do something with discrepancies in the medical field, for care, healthcare discrepancies. So then it was just like your mind wanders. And I thought of The Onion. It would do like the 5 top things to do or 5 top whatevers. And it was like very sarcastic kind of thing. And so I thought I was going to take that approach. And then you kind of come across something else. And I was like, ooh, it's attack of the healthcare disparities. And then I just kind of went from there. And then I found something and I could kind of follow that idea through. The other was when I was actually co-teaching multicultural, and a different instructor, but kept the digital story assignment in and actually allowed me to kind of redesign it or reimagine it with the criteria that the instructor wanted included as well. And helping them create videos. I watched Childish Gambino, This Is America video, and it just got so in my head. I was so like, whoa, and all the symbolism in it throughout the entire video. And so kind of saying like, well, what if I could get the students to make a video where they're not necessarily outright talking about the symbolism, but they can also talk about symbols that are meaningful to them when they're telling their story, something like that. So anyway, I get a lot from pop culture, but then trying to transpose it into something meaningful in the classroom. All right, Eric, next question.
So I'm going to do a disclaimer prior to my question and ask that responses please be PG-13. The question is, what do you find yourself daydreaming about? Gina.
So I have a very direct answer for this one. Finishing my dissertation. I find that consumes most of my thoughts, most of my daydreams, most of my nightmares, most of my, like we talked about, inspiration in the shower. I need some more inspiration to figure out how to get more participants. These are the things that my daydreams are made of. So finishing my dissertation is my straightforward answer. Jen?
I cannot stop thinking about traveling, about being somewhere else, about walking down the jet bridge into the aircraft and smelling jet fuel mixed with old coffee. You know that smell when you enter in?
It's distinct.
And it is incredibly distinct. And I want that smell to fill my nostrils and my being, because it means that I'm going somewhere new, that I might be seeing my family and my friends and gonna be in a different space than this electronic one in which we're living. Of course, there's these thoughts that we're all well and we're not wearing masks and all of those kinds of things. But I just want to be somewhere else. And literally in my dream, I had a dream during a nap the other day, and it was like a 40-minute nap. So it was very bizarre to be having such an involved dream. But I was in Italy and I was telling the people I was with, oh, I'm just here for 2 days, practically nothing at all. I've seen it all. I keep coming back here. I've had to travel here so frequently lately. This was like so crazy because I've been to Italy once, and it was last year. And so it was really interesting that like I'm having dreams now that I have repeated going to places and that I'm going so frequently that, yeah, show me something new and I'm hardly here and I'm going to be back across to the US. Like it was so indicative, I think, of my yearning to be on a plane and be somewhere else. Elliot?
Well, I think most of you can guess where I want to be. I want to be north of the border, and there's a lot of stuff going on. But my daydream, I've done a lot of prose writing in the last few years, and it's culminated in this novel that I'm close to finishing, and it's a feminist novel, and it has a lot of queer characters who are the heroes, the protagonists. And as a queer person, my partner is not, my children are not, but I do not feel safe in this country. And I love my kids and they don't want to leave, and I will be here as long as they need me to be here. But my daydream is that I would actually be able to sell this novel and get a fresh start. I would like, if my family history is any indication, I've got 30 to 40 more years, but only 20 of them are going to be really functional. And I'd like one more big adventure, and I'd like to get back to Canada and try a fresh start. That is what I would really, really love. And that's what I daydream about. Marty?
I daydream a lot about work. It's crazy. I will be thinking about work. Sometimes I've been thinking more about travel. I'll tell you, tonight I had on one screen as I was doing some work, I had James Bond From Russia with Love. Now, there's no reason for me to see that film anymore. I've seen it a gazillion times, but it's shot in Istanbul, and I could look at all the different scenes and identify places where it was shot. So I do daydream about travel and doing that more often. But to not turn this into a morose sort of thinking, when you're closer to the end of your life than you are to the beginning of your life, more often I'm daydreaming about my remaining years. What's it going to be like? What will I do? Things like that. So not to put a sad spin on it, but yeah, that's what I think about. Steph?
Well, and Marty, From Russia with Love, Robert Shaw. Oh my gosh, right? Saying.
I was more interested in Hagia Sophia and some of the locations than Robert Shaw.
So I'm 100% in with Gina. Being done with dissertation, I'm still at a fairly early stage of dissertation. So I don't want to spend too much time daydreaming about it instead of actually doing it and getting it done. However, yes, in the evenings, cuddled up with Mike on the couch, baby, one day I'll be done. He's like, yeah, that'll be great. So it's kind of a co-daydream of just being done and not being in school while being with him, because I don't think that's happened since our marriage started. So, Eric.
Yeah, I mean, I asked the question partly because I use my own daydreams as a gauge for how I'm doing. So I'll notice a theme with my own daydreams. If it's thinking about fantasies or stories, or dreaming up different things that I might do in the classroom, or the more that I have of that, the more settled I feel. And the more that's going on, the less I feel like I do that. I do more worrying or more contemplating of what ifs. And I don't feel like that's daydreaming. I feel like that's settled in worrying or anxiety or whatever the case may be. And I've noticed I've had these fleeting periods of really daydreaming and feeling settled, and it's just been much more volatile given the situation. But when I daydream, I find myself now, again, like everybody else, to some degree, thinking about travel, thinking about doing things again and seeing people again, and just really missing that interaction. And I have to think, well, I'm fairly well adjusted. I can employ several self-care tactics and have a finite plan and resources and handle this fairly well, and become really concerned about those who may not have the same. And then start daydreaming about what this is going to look like when it's done. What are the needs going to be out there when it's done? So it's interesting. It was just something that's been on my mind lately, what my daydreams look like and what they mean, and kind of what they mean to me. So that inspired the question. So I think Gina has the next one.
I just want to say, Eric, sorry, Gina.
Yeah, no.
I loved the question, because one of the things I found in counseling people, I always want to know, what are your daydreams? And there's actually research. There are people who have kind of ego congruent daydreams, and they are often helping other people, bettering their life. And there are people who have kind of ego dystonic daydreams where they're being, destroyed by outside forces. And daydreams are such a critical aspect of our psychic life. And I just appreciate you bringing that up.
Yeah, well, and no, I might have to look a little bit harder at it, Elliot, because it's not something I'm really familiar with. So I appreciate you bringing it up. It gives me somewhere to go.
So my question is, what advice would you have for someone considering a PhD? We'll start with Jen.
I'm not so sure if it's advice as much as it would be two key questions. First is why? And I try not to say that with like an edge to it of like, why? But I think it connects really nicely to the second question of, do you need a PhD to do the job that you want to do? Because, and this is totally my impression, my bias, whatever, name something, that I feel like sometimes with our traditional age students who come through the master's program, they want to get a PhD because they are afraid to go to work. Like, just not sure that they have enough skills or whatever. Because guess what? We don't have enough skills when we graduate from our master's program. We have just enough to get us out there and learn more skills. And so I think for some, they're afraid to like go to work and be in the real world. And so I think the best advice, I guess, is if you need it for your job, yes, take yourself out of the workforce, pursue the PhD, do it in a timely fashion and keep it moving so that you get back into the workforce. Not because I'm some kind of like workhorse machine, but because being out of the workforce means you are not making money, it's costing you money, and you don't have money going into retirement. And I'm, as a person who's in that middle age time period now, who does not want to work till she's 80, I think that's an important consideration of being able to bank money in. That's why it's so devastating that my university is not investing in my retirement this year, because that 8% went away. My 5% investment's still going in, but their 8% is gone. And so that's, I'm not right close to retirement, so it's not as devastating as some. I have time to make it up. But I think those are things that I would want people to take into consideration in terms of, like, are you going to get bang for your buck and return on your investment in terms of this being something that's financially wise for you? Sometimes you can't not do it, even if it's a financially crap decision. But honestly, to the best of your ability, like, put money in the coffer and stop taking it out so that you can retire at an age that is good for you and that you can enjoy your life without work. Elliot?
Wow, that's very powerful. I'm sorry to hear about that. And I know that's happening across the country. We've all taken pay cuts, and I have a whole oratory about white dominant culture structures and how all of this works so that the university mimics the country in terms of the 1% and the 99%, but I won't go there. I was thinking of Al Pacino's character of John Milton in The Devil's Advocate. I think he said the worst vice is advice. It's like, I had great mentors, but I was very pig-headed. And I think it was Joe Saunders. Marty, you might remember Joe Saunders. Great person in the counseling profession. And we were talking about, how to, proceed forward. And I was very outspoken at the time. And he said, well, I could tell Elliot, but he wouldn't listen. And I laughed, but I was like, no, you're totally right. I probably wouldn't. But I was thinking about Joseph Campbell, and in terms of myself, if you love it, do it. Do what you love. And even if you want, I've been broke. I've lived in my car for summers. Even if you are broke, at least you have what you love. And I really think there is some wisdom to that. Now, of course, that's a privileged perspective, because if you do what you love and your skin's not white, you might end up in prison just because, I was sleeping in my car because I don't want to pay rent because I'm studying at university. I understand that. But along with Jen, I also think if there are two types of people who come in to talk about PhDs. One is they have a vision, they have an inspiration, and I'm like, okay, how should you follow that? And others are more utilitarian. And I'm like, for those people, what are the job prospects? Where do you see yourself? What do you need to earn in order to live the life you want to live? So I would try to titrate, I guess, my advice in terms of what they needed. I hope I would anyway. Marty.
Well, similar to what other folks have said, know why you want it, a PhD, and what do you want to do with it before you start the PhD. You also realize that it's a hell of a lot of work, and it's work like you have never done before. So quite a bit of it's unfamiliar to you, particularly the dissertation. And most of all, do not take advice from me about getting a PhD. 3 pieces of advice. The third one, the most important. Steph.
Right. So again, have been trained to never give advice, even to friends now, even in non-counseling settings. I get really weirded out when the A word is used, but, for consideration, besides the why, because that's what I have like really big on the top of my list, was just why in capital letters and underlined. But beyond that, once you get into the program, once you're going through and you find yourself in a PhD program, maybe there's a good chance that your experience is not going to rest solely on being a good student. It's not going to rest on you getting good grades, because there's also, beyond what you do outside, there's so much interpersonal communication that needs to occur and dealing with different personalities successfully and kind of navigating a whole lot of different social situations that you need to play the game, but you also need to, be true to yourself and be genuine in what you're doing. So just to kind of be ready to accept that sometimes, it's not about you being right. It's not about things being just or, the way they quote unquote should be, but you got to learn how to navigate it and deal with it without it taking you down. So that's kind of what I would just suggest to people as they enter a PhD program, if they've already, been considering it heavily. Eric.
Yeah, so I walked into my PhD program orientation, and one of the faculty said, "Welcome to Masters 2.0." And I thought, what the hell did I just do? And, some of it is that way or felt that way for me in my experience. And it made me think, what Marty said is true. There's a lot more that goes into this than went into your master's, very different experiences. Curricularly, you're taking what you learned and kicking it up a notch, right? But there's also these other elements as well. I think part of what my experience made me realize it might be helpful for others is to consider that faculty experience, right? That what program are you going to? It's more important, even more so because you have that dissertation phase that there's faculty there that you're comfortable with, that you're inspired by, that you want to work with, that, and you may need to do some digging. And, that interview process for that doctoral program isn't just about you as a student. You should be evaluating those faculty just as much to determine whether these are people that you want to spend 5, 6, 7 years with, because you're going to be working through this with those individuals. I think the why is really important. I found that I've never been happier than when I'm teaching. I know that about myself. I've done a lot of different things. I have plenty of stories about my failed attempts at other career paths, and always happy to share them. But this is the part of the job this is the reason I wanted the PhD. The title means very little to me, but it's what I needed to do to be able to teach in this field. And I knew that's truly where I'd be happy. So I think it was time and money well spent. And it's not the only path that you can take with a doctoral degree, but it's the one that was right for me. So I think you have to think about what is that going to lead to for you? Is it going to lead to that type of happiness? And what are you putting forth in terms of time and effort to get there? Gina.
So my motivation in asking this question it stems from every quarter that I teach. I have students who ask me, what advice do you have for someone who's considering a PhD? And aside from my also personal beliefs about the advice word, and my enmeshment in the current process and my frustrations with where I'm at and everything else that's going on, I'm not sure why students ask me this all the time. And I think part of it is because every quarter I introduce myself as, hi, I'm Gina Martin, and I'm a doctoral candidate, meaning I'm still in a doc program, blah, blah, blah. So maybe I feel more approachable about this to students. But each and every quarter, I have so many students who ask about this. And every time, and I love what all of you have said, but what really resonated with me too was what Elliot, you mentioned with having that analytical, it's not about me and my experiences, but it's more about, what's bringing you to this and the why question that everybody's brought up. But I come from a pretty analytical background too, and an analytical family background. And my husband is in business and all this. And it's more like the opportunity cost of putting your career on hold for so many years and spending so much time and energy and effort and money and everything to go into this. And if you don't truly love it and need it, then I think, and I've seen, you're going to burn out at some point. So I think having some of those conversations up front are good. And another hard piece of advice is just don't have a baby when you're doing it like I did, because that's really not going to help along the way. So that's where that came from. So next question goes to Jen.
All right. So I don't think this question is going to surprise anyone, given where my mind has seemingly been through my answers this evening. So, what do you all typically do on a long haul flight? So, thinking 5+ hours. And if you need to specify based on what direction you're going, whether east or west, because I do have different answers for those, one's at night, one's during the day. Feel free to get in on that. So, Elliot.
Well, so I've got a lot of spine injuries. I've had tons of procedures, and most of the time I work at a standing desk. So sitting on a long haul flight is an ordeal. And I had a consulting gig where I consulted in Colorado once a month. It was about a year and a half. And coming out of Ohio, I would use my standard pain medication to be able to endure the flight, and I would read. But coming back from Colorado, I would have cannabis edibles, and I would chat up everyone on the plane, and we had a great time. I would just, whoever was sitting next to me, I'd be like, oh, you're reading a book. What are you reading? And, I'd draw in the person behind me, and I was just like, oh, that's a much better way to go through a long haul flight. I mean, I just really enjoyed that. Now, I haven't been on a plane for a long time, but I imagine that, now that we have the medical cannabis in Ohio, that I'd be able to go both ways and have lots of new acquaintances. Marty, how about you?
Wow. I was trying to think if your answer changed my answer altogether, but my answer is basically I can't sleep. When I think of long haul flights, I'm thinking other countries. I almost like to go, yeah, I have to do 19 hours of flying to get where I have to go next. I mean, the longer the better, but I can't sleep, and I can't sleep on flights, or should I say I won't sleep on flights. Ever since I had a traumatic experience falling asleep on a flight. I was on a plane from Paris to Istanbul, and I have sleep apnea. And you wake up and you're all congested and all of your passages are dry. It's quite obviously that you've been snoring for 5 hours. Well, I woke up and noticed all the rows around me had cleared out completely and moved to other portions of the plane. And the attendant, saw me kind of wake up and said in that pompous French way, "Oh, you're awake." And that was it for me. I cannot sleep on any other flights for fear of that experience. I generally watch movies and listen to podcasts. In fact, it was listening to podcasts back in 2005 on a flight to Turkey where I started to think about doing podcasts then in 2006. So I try to find ways to be entertained for, these 8-hour overseas flights. Most of the movies on the planes back in that time were all P and PG movies, which held no interest to me, but were very safe. So nobody on the plane would be offended by them. And now you get a greater variety of selection in films, but I still put them on my phone. I load my phone up with films, so I have something to watch. I used to pretend that I would work. Nah, by the time I get ready to go on get on one of these big trips, I get on a plane, not going to work, going to watch movies. So I still load my phone up with films and watch them, not only for the plane, but to watch them while I wait in airports. Steph.
Yeah, media, audio when I was younger. I haven't been on too many really long haul flights. The first one was going on a school trip to France back in like freshman year of high school. So that was quite some time ago. And that was getting to watch Under Siege both ways. But it was still entertaining because I wouldn't have gone to the theater to see it. And, at the time, it was an entertaining movie. So now the last long flight, I think, was just last year, actually, the only other time, and that was to Seattle. I think one way it was about 5 hours. It still might be a little under. But when I was younger, I used to fly all the time, like 2.5 hours, Florida and back. My parents would throw me on a plane by myself when I was 4. She'll be fine. This is when stewardess and people could meet you at the gate, right? So it was fine. It wasn't like I was walking through an airport by myself. And then somehow when I was going through adolescence or something, by that time, I developed a fear. And all of a sudden I got a lot of anxiety when I was flying, and mostly just takeoff and landing. So now, instead of being a wired, just freaked out individual on the plane, I kind of take a slightly different route, but similar to Elliot. I have my trusty relaxation help. And then I get to watch whatever movies, because it's just like having all the selections in front of you, and I can zone out. And also window seats are important. Eric.
So I had to take a minute to compose myself after Elliot's story, and Marty's really too. Because the last long haul flight I had, I attempted to watch the same movie. It's about a 90-minute movie for about 3.5 hours. The gentleman next to me was having a really good time and not picking up on social cues and talking to me through the headphones. I had the headphones on and he's talking at me with them on. Very sociable, nice guy. I really wanted to get into the plot of the movie and could not. And then I have the same issue as Marty. I just have perpetual allergies, and, I'm perpetually congested. So I fall asleep and I'm snoring. So I can't, because the entire plane would suffer. So generally for me, it's some type of media. I do enjoy reading, and I get into, I have taken like puzzle books and those kinds of things with me. I like the kind of tactile stuff. So I'll take an actual like physical puzzle book with me, but apps and games are fun too, to keep occupied. I often find for sitting that long, I need to switch tasks pretty regularly. I don't know that I can sit and watch a couple of movies. I have to like have different things to do. So that always helps me out. What about you, Gina?
Yeah, I don't know. I love you all, but I'm not sure I'd want to fly with any of you at this point. I've flown a lot in my day. Back in high school, so all the way back, I had a boyfriend who was a pilot, actually. So I flew in all those horrifying, terrifying little tiny propeller planes. Although looking back, I have no idea why my parents allowed that. He was also similar to Elliot and Steph. He loved to engage in some of those, then illegal things and fly, which is horrifying to me now. But anyway, we made it through. I survived. And since then, I can't sleep on planes either. So I've done a few really, really long ones to Africa and stuff like that. And I like to read. I like to watch movies. But similar to Eric, I also cannot sit through one thing for that long on those. So I try to bounce around. But post-college, so I met my now husband, when we were in college. We went to school in California, and we would always fly back to the Midwest. So breaking the rules a little bit, the flight was about 4:45 minutes long. And we would write notes to each other the entire plane ride back and forth. And that's the only thing that would keep our engagement for the entire 4.5-hour plane ride. And so that is my favorite pastime. That's something that we've always done. Anytime we fly together, we'll take a notebook, just a blank notebook, and we'll write notes to one another and talk the entire time through writing. So that's my little backstory on that. Jen, back to you.
Well, that's precious, Gina. I just absolutely love that. So I do not talk to people I do not know on long haul flights. So, sorry, Elliot, you might, if we're on a commuter flight to Atlanta, happy to talk with you. But I need to know that I can get away from whomever wants to have a conversation if I don't find it interesting. Sorry, I'm a snob, I guess. But nobody wants to be locked, to the UK next to somebody who finds out that you're a therapist and wants to tell you their problems. So I should have asked the question of, do you tell the truth about your profession? It depends. Sometimes I do. Most of the time I don't. The only time I do is when I see a networking opportunity, which has happened on more than one occasion. And I've gotten some side hustles, and that's been cool. But I tend, if it's during the semester, I do tend to work, at least going to my destination, because if it's a conference or a meeting, y'all know you're not getting anything done in that hotel room. You're so dead. I mean, those of you who are introverts, you're dead by the time you're done with the final dinner, and you do not want to have to do work. And on my way to Seattle for the summer business meeting, whatever that was, which feels like 10 years ago, I think it was just last year, I told myself that I had to use miles to upgrade to first class so that I could work, which, by the way, I did do because I was in a seat way far back where I knew that somebody was going to smack my laptop if I were to open it on the tray table in front of me. So I couldn't get a bulkhead. So I used the miles, and I did work, but I won't work the whole time because I love the Delta Studio, because it lets me watch movies and shows that are on HBO and Hulu, and I don't subscribe to any of those. So that's a very fun thing, because then it's like my little prize of when I finish my work that I can watch Big Little Lies, for example, which was an HBO show. And I could not watch that because I have Netflix and, broadcast TV. So I get into these little shows. So it's like my little prize. I do read. I have been known to put on the Bose headphones and read a novel with nothing on the headphones, so that people, if they do talk to me, that I can pretend like I don't hear them. Because, again, locked in a tin can, I just can't do it with a bunch of strangers for that amount of time. But I no longer sleep, not because of the terrifying stories that people have told so far, but because I've actually found that on overnight flights, my jet lag is it's non-existent if I just stay awake, which happened by accident, because when I flew to England last summer, I couldn't fall asleep for whatever reason. I'd taken my typical Benadryl cocktail with my wine, with my supper, and it didn't knock me out. And so I stayed awake, and I did great until 10 o'clock the next night, and I crashed out and woke up at 7 o'clock the next morning. I was good to go. No jet lag. So I've now actually decided that sleeping on the plane is, unless it's, I don't know, if it's 20 hours or something, I guess you have to fall asleep eventually. But yeah, no more sleeping for me on the airplane. It doesn't help. Maybe a little cat nap. I cat nap on the way back. So if I'm headed west, I can cat nap on the way back, but that's it. I think we are headed now into final shot.
So that's it for tonight. We've got one final shot question, and the question is invisibility or super strength? We start with Elliot.
Absolutely super strength, because it implies my joints all still work.
I will choose invisibility because I could do all these fun things, such as sit in the empty seats at a ride at Cedar Point and just go around and around and around and never have to get off the roller coaster. Infinite rides. Eric.
I chose invisibility just because I feel like it's improving on a currently existing skill, as I can be in a room and invisible, and this way actually invisible. Gina.
I also chose invisibility. Yeah. Similar reasons to all. Jen?
I hadn't even thought about that reason. You made me rethink my answer for a second there, Eric. And I chose super strength because I think invisibility seems stalkerish and creepy. Marty?
And Jen, I'm with you. I think it would be kind of, maybe when I was younger or prankish, it would be fun to be invisible. But beyond that, man, I need super strength. That comes in much more usable. So thanks to the squad, Gina, Stephanie, Eric, Jen, and Elliot. And what did we learn tonight? Well, we learned Steph is donating her eyesight to her doc program. And the rest of you will all teach anything because you have soft underbellies when it comes to saying what you won't teach. Look for some of these characters on their podcasts on thepodtalk.net. You can find out more about them at circularfiringsquad.net. Our theme music is from Menage a Quad, Real Swing Shet. That's it for this episode of the Circular Firing Squad. Ready, fire, aim.